This happened at the last house my mother, sister, and I were renting in. The house had changed hands every year or so, and it belonged to a renting company rather than a regular landlord, so we didn't have any information about the previous residents of the place. It was a decent neighborhood, so we didn't think it was necessary to check. About 8 months after moving in, last January, I was playing video games in the office on a Saturday night. At about midnight or so, I was startled by an aggressive loud banging on our front door. The banging was so hard that it sounded like the door was going to fly off the hinges, and it echoed through the entire house. It was loud enough that my mother could hear it from her room with the door closed and music on. We all know it's never a good thing when someone bangs on your door that hard in the middle of the night, but that didn't stop my badass mother from racing downstairs to beat me to the door to see what the hell was happening. She answered it by pulling up the blinds from the window next to the door. It revealed a man who looked to be in his 20s standing very close to the door. He replied that he was looking for someone named Jamal. Nobody knew a guy with that name, so she told him that no one was there. The guy kept persisting, with my mother continuing to insist that the person that they were looking for didn't live here. After a few minutes, my mother would later tell me that there was another guy who appeared from the left, coming around from the side of the house, where some windows were. It became very clear that he was checking for Jamal in case my mother was lying or something. Thankfully, they eventually left. The next morning, I took our car to drive to work and noticed that it wasn't driving right as I was sliding around the lane. I didn't pay too much attention to it as it had snowed a couple days prior, so I thought there was ice on the road in some places and assumed it was black ice. It wasn't until someone in the parking lot of the store that I worked at flagged me down and told me that 2 of my tires were losing air and flattening out. I carefully drove back home and told my mother what happened with the tires, and it finally clicked. The angry knocking at midnight, the aggressive demand for a guy we didn't know, the guy scouting around the side of our house, likely looking through windows. They slashed all of our tires, which means they were likely armed with at least a knife. The thought of them not believing us and breaking in still haunts me to this day because we wouldn't have had any way to fight back if they chose to keep looking. It's the first time I've ever felt completely helpless. A few weeks later, we got a package for someone who was the previous tenant, and a guy came looking for it after assuming it was delivered to their old residence. Turns out, that guy was Jamal's older brother. We told him what happened, and he seemed completely blindsided by the information, as if it was the first time he heard that his little brother may have been involved with the wrong crowd. I don't know what happened afterwards, but hopefully the revelation led to Jamal getting help. Also, we got some free tires out of the deal, so it wasn't a total loss. I'd rather not see those 2 guys ever again, especially in the middle of the night. We moved out a couple months later. So, this happened quite a few years ago. I'm from Australia and live in a town of about 500,000 people. I currently live in Sydney, and there are so many stories I could share, but this one comes to mind when I saw this thread. We live in the south side of this town, and we're visited by my grandmother and extended family, who were down for the weekend from Sydney. Everything is very suburban and quite close to each other, and we often stayed at my grandmother's very late when my family came down, just watching movies or having dinner together. My dad was abusive and didn't like my mother's side of the family, so we always went without him. We ended up leaving around 12:30 or 1 a.m., and we were in a van together. My 3 sisters, who were 3, 7, and 18, and my autistic brother. We were about 5 minutes away from our house when we see a man standing in the middle of the road with his arms outstretched in front of him, signaling for us to stop. My mom slowed the car down, not wanting to hit him, and when she did, at least 5 guys came out from the bushes on the side of the road, all carrying some kind of weapon. By this time, the car is stationary, and we're all in shock. They surrounded the car and no one said a word. They didn't swear at us, weren't drunk, weren't yelling obscenities or being racist. Our background is Pakistani. They were just standing around the car staring. This was scary because all of them were wearing bandanas around their mouth and were wearing hoodies. There were children in the car and an autistic person, but they looked like they wanted to do some serious damage to all of us. I kind of remember my brother not understanding and wanting to roll down the window, but I think I was too scared to explain why he shouldn't. Luckily he didn't. The guy who stopped our car was egging on another guy who was in the front of the car to hit us. Hit the fucking car. Hit the bitch. And the guy is like trying to pump himself up and swing the bat or whatever he was holding. He was about to swing and I'm getting the feeling that the other guy surrounding the car just wanted him to make the first move. Just as he's about to hit the car, my older sister snaps out of whatever shock we were all in and screams, "Mom, drive!" And my mom floors it. The two dudes pretty much had to dive out of the way to avoid being hit. We were on top of a hill and were about to drive down. They started to chase after the car on foot for some stupid reason, and a few guys started to throw things out the back window. When I was younger, I thought it was stupid idiots just trying to fuck up someone's night, but now I feel like it was gang related after I thought about how they acted when they were waiting for the one guy to swing at the car first. And the way that they were dressed. This all happened pretty fast, but it felt like it lasted forever. Afterwards, we get home and my mom calls the police, but needless to say, nothing much came out of it. They searched the area and that was it. I've been following this subreddit for a while now, and just remember this encounter I had. Several years ago, I was in high school. I think I was a freshman, so about 14 or 15. Me and my boyfriend, his aunt, and sometimes his cousin, or best friends, would always go ghost hunting on the weekends. My mom knew his aunt and was always in contact, so she was okay with us staying out late. She would even join us sometimes. Anyway, this story isn't paranormal, but one night when we were on a ghost hunting trip to our favorite spot, which is a creepy back road going up along the mountains. It's a dirt road and no one really uses it, especially at night. Some creepy stuff has happened, but that's for a different time and subreddit. It had to be any time between midnight and 2 a.m. We stopped at a pull-off and rolled down our windows to see if we hear anything. We started getting into deep conversation about our lives when a car drives by. It happens from time to time. We brush it off. But then the car drives back again. They keep driving up and down, passing us about 3 or 4 times. Then they pulled up directly behind us, so we start to drive away and they proceed to follow us. We decide to turn around back into the town instead of more into the mountain. Note, this road is very small. There are pullouts everywhere so you can turn into one to let another car pass. We pretty much drifted, but we turned around and squeezed our way past the car. We got a glimpse of the driver and passenger, and they were both wearing bandanas over their face. And I don't remember if there were others in the back seat, but we noped the fuck out of there. It's all a blur. We were going at least 80 down this road, all the way back into town. We tried to go down the first side street as we get to town to try to lose them, but they were still tailing us. We were all shitting bricks and decided to go to the Denny's across the street, park right in front, and jump out, running inside. Right as we were running through the front entrance, there was this loud pop. We all get inside thinking that these fuckers shot at us, but it was only one pop, so we look out the front window and the car is driving away with a popped tire. Karma's a bitch. It was a truly terrifying experience, and I'm so glad nothing happened to us. We decided to get some food at Denny's and call the cops to report what happened. Nothing ever came of it, but we do have a gang presence here, and with the bandanas on their face, we thought it could have been an initiation of some sort, or just dumb people thinking it was funny to scare the shit out of people. So bandana dudes who had to buy a new tire, let's not meet. I have posted in the subreddit before about an encounter I had as a child and realized I have more stories from my past that would fit here as well. This is a long story. I hope I can keep it engaging. This happened when I was 12 years old. I grew up in a developing nation, so many of the folks who read regularly here might not completely understand or relate to the circumstances of the incident, but I'll try my best to give any background necessary. I was never given permission by my parents to stay out after 7 p.m. for any reason, regardless of the requirement. A movie that ends at 6:30 p.m. and I was dropped off at home by my friend's parents? No. Studying at my neighbor's house past 7 p.m. No. So I was naturally very excited when I got permission to go watch a late night movie with all my cousins and stay the night at my grandmother's house. There were 6 of us together, 5 males and 1 female. I was the youngest, rest were adults, mid-20s. The movie finishes at 2 a.m. and we were asked to go straight from the movie theater to home, which is nearby. I was more excited to see the city late at night than watching the new movie that was a big hit. We all went in 3 motorcycles to the theater and decided once the movie was over, we would go to a cafe that was open 24/7 and have some ice cream. This was the only place that was still open, and it was relatively far away from my grandparents' house. I can't tell you how excited all of us were because it was a new place that opened up in my city and was very popular. My friends used to brag about how many times they visited this place and how beautiful the view of the city lake is in the middle of the night. Once the movie was over, we'd come outside. Except for a crowd from the theater, the roads were completely deserted, not a soul in sight. Only the streetlights lit up the road, filled with potholes and nothing. Not even the medical stores were open. My female cousin had extremely strict parents, so she declined to come and said she had to be home because her parents were waiting for her to get back. We all tried to convince her to come with us. We're 6 of us after all, but to no end. She was adamant that she had to come home, and we eventually decided to let her go. There was 4 of us now, on 2 motorcycles, and started riding towards the cafe. I was on the back with my brother, and I noticed that 1 motorcycle was following us. It was easy to notice as we were the only other people on the roads. I told my brother immediately, and he said that they were probably going to the same place and to just ignore it. A little further, another motorcyclist asked my cousin to stop and pretended to ask for directions. They stopped, thinking that these guys were lost, and started to give them directions. While we were talking to the guys asking for directions, 2 more motorcycles show up and surround us, 8 of them suddenly. At this point, we realized this was an ambush, but it was already too late. One of the guys pushed my cousin from the motorcycle onto the ground and started hitting him. The rest of us were trying to defend him. Once the fight stops and one of my cousins is bleeding all over, they start to ask us to call our female cousin and tell her to come back. They had been following us from the theater. They said tell her that you need to talk to her so she can come back. At first, we pretended that there was no woman with us and that we didn't know what he was talking about. One of the men told us that he would kill us if we didn't ask her to come back. The roads were abandoned, and the occasional car would go down the road just past us without slowing down. Most likely the people were too afraid to get involved. The guys were clearly having fun, laughing while they punched us and kicked us. One of my cousins punches one of the guys and yells, "Run!" And instinctively, we all run in different directions, abandoning our motorcycles on the street. They start chasing us on foot at first. Then they went back, got on their motorcycles, and chased us through the streets. I didn't have a mobile phone with me, and I'm unfamiliar with the area. I ran randomly, looking for a hiding place. I jumped a wall of some random person's house, while the motorcyclists drove by on the roads looking for us. I don't know where the rest of my cousins were, especially the one that was bleeding badly. The house I jumped into was home to a huge dog who started barking at me, waking up the owners. They obviously assumed that I was there to rob them, but having one look at a 12-year-old boy in tears and clearly shaken, they asked me what happened. I explained everything to them. They gave me the phone and I called the police, who said they would dispatch a patrol car and we can expect them in 2 hours. I had all my brother's numbers memorized, but didn't want to call them, afraid that they might be hiding and the ringing cell might give it away. I thanked the kind people who offered to host me until the next morning, but I had to get to my grandmother's place to find out if my cousins had made it back. I sneaked through the trees and found my grandparents' house. 2 of my cousins made it back, but my brother was still out there. Finally, he calls us and tells us that he's hiding and will come back once the sun is out and there's a general crowd outside. Until dawn, the motorcyclists kept passing our house, and we were all afraid that they followed one of us home. At dawn, my brother gets back, and I ended up being the only one uninjured. One of my cousins got stitches on his face, another one broke his ribs, and my brother had a hairline fracture. We all ran through the night, and suddenly, all the strict impositions by my parents make sense to us. My brothers called the cops too, and no one ever showed up. There was no support from anyone. I can't imagine what would have happened if my female cousin was with us. We never got a call back from the cops to ask if we were fine. I can't begin to imagine what would have happened if they caught one of us. Needless to say, we never went out anywhere late at night for a long time. Hey, this is Bad Vibes, and this is a bonus story for this topic. So when I was a teenager, I hung out with, gang members. I'm white, my friends were all Mexican. So one day, my friend and I are pulling up to a party. It was around 10 p.m. But as we get there, it looks like it had been broken up. Didn't see any cops, but everyone was leaving. I figured out later that something went down there, so everyone was fleeing. So anyway, we hop in the car, turn around, and then stop at a gas station as I was almost out of gas. And we were meeting up with other friends in 2 different cars that were a few minutes away. As I'm getting out of my car to get gas, a Honda Civic pulls up. There's 2 dudes in the front and I believe 2 girls in the back. A Mexican dude comes up to me and has me pinned between my car and my door. He was clearly mad, thinking I was someone else. I'm just staring at him, not knowing what to do. We only had a blade on us and we were in a rivals area, so basically I just froze. I'm just staring at this guy, and the funny thing is I noticed a mole on his forehead and I'm just staring at it, thinking about it. While the shit's going down, I'm just thinking about this mole on his forehead. Anyway, dude sucker punches me in the face while I'm thinking about his mole, and I stand there thinking like, what the fuck? Well, the guy that hit me looks over to about 15 other Mexican dudes that are just chilling at the gas station. They were about 40 feet away from us, and I hadn't seen them before. One dude comes over, and you could tell that he's definitely a gangster. He walks up to me, lifts up his shirt, and he has a gun. And I'm like, shit, I'm gonna die for a reason I don't know. And I didn't even get to go to the party. Anyways, and thank God, the girl in the back seat says, it's not him. And the dude just looks at me, doesn't apologize, and just eventually leaves. I'm assuming they got into a fight with a white boy, or a group of white boys, and they saw me leaving, and me being one of the only few white people around, I think they assumed it was me. But that girl really saved me. Anyway, they leave. I get my gas. At the time I was pumping gas, my other friends show up. I think it was like 3 dudes and 2 chicks. We tell them what happened, they go inside and give me ice, and then we head to another party. I got some sympathy from the girls, so it was alright, I guess. But anyway, that's one of many stories that I have, but was one of the only altercations that I didn't deserve. Anyway, I survived. I hung out with my friends until I was about 19. When they got busted at a party that I was supposed to be at, I decided to get my shit together. And if I didn't, there'd probably be no bad vibes. I used to work at a little bagel shop in my hometown a few years back. I believe I was 17 at the time. The shop opened at 6 a.m., so an opening shift started solo at 5 a.m., with your second opener showing up 30 minutes later. On this particular morning, I'm scheduled for the solo open, and my good friend, we can call her Amanda, was the second opener. Around this time of the year, it was still pitch black that early in the morning, and we weren't allowed to park in the business parking because, being that it was a small business, the spaces were prioritized for customers. So I had a short walk through the dark from the side street to get to the back gate of the shop. Anyways, I hop out of my car, lock it behind me, and start heading towards the building, and almost instantly after I lock my car, I see a figure pop out of the bushes of the neighboring building. It's a man dressed all in black with a baseball cap on. He starts down the sidewalk adjacent to me, and I tell myself that he's probably just an innocent homeless guy using the bathroom in the bushes. Maybe he got embarrassed when he saw me coming and stood up. Stupid, I know, but I keep my keys in hand and an eye on him. As I get closer towards the building, every time I peer over at him, he's already staring at me, making no effort to hide it. At this point, I pick up the pace, and he does the same. As I'm about to reach the parking lot, he shifts off the sidewalk and is now headed through the lot straight towards me. This is when I start to panic and realize the severity of the situation. For a split second, I just paused and completely stopped walking. I knew I wasn't close enough to be able to outrun him to the gate. With him crossing the parking lot, he would beat me there. But I also didn't have much confidence in my ability to outrun him back to my car. In that same moment, I guess he sees me second guessing myself and took the opportunity to begin full sprinting towards me. I see him grab something from his pocket, and running back to the car becomes my only option, because 17-year-old me would have to juke out a grown man who possibly has a weapon to make it to that gate. I don't think I've ever ran so fast in my life, literally ran like my life depended on it, and I could hear his feet smacking the road right behind me. I didn't scream or yell for help, I just remember thinking to myself, get to the fucking car. And by some means, I made it to the door and was able to lock myself inside. It was weird to me that he didn't even try to get into my car or pull the door. He kinda just stepped back, breathing all heavily, staring at me through my window before running back towards the back of the building and hopping a gated fence, which is where we unlock to get inside the building. I started my car and called 911. The operator told me to wait at the nearest open business, which was a Starbucks, and the cops would call me back when they had checked out the surrounding area. I started driving that way, and I'm like, oh fuck. I remember that Amanda will be showing up any minute now and walking to the back where a dude might still be hiding. I call her and she says he's pulling up to work. I tell her don't get out of the car and give her the rundown of what just happened, and we meet up at Starbucks and wait for the cops to call us back. They check it out and he's gone. They stay while we open, get whatever info they still needed, and take off. We were both pretty shaken up for the rest of the day, and the more we discuss, the worse we feel. Amanda tells me that earlier in the week she remembers a man coming in right before closing and asking her questions that rubbed her the wrong way. Just stuff like saying he noticed that we didn't have any male employees, asking how many people usually work every day. If you guys open at 6, you must have to get here real early, huh? And some other offhanded stuff. She said when she left, he was sitting outside eating his food and saw her come from the back gate and lock up. She remembered what the man looked like, but the guy's face was a blur for me after how fast everything happened. We both assumed that it has to be the same man, but who knows? Going forward from that day, my boss started scheduling us to open in pairs at 5:30 instead of 5, and you weren't allowed to go inside until your partner had arrived. We never had an issue like that again, but I've definitely cried and had major panic attacks every day for a couple of weeks afterwards, thinking about what could have happened. So, fuck you, Bushman. This happened to me when I was a sophomore at high school, about 12 years ago. My girlfriend at the time, Katie, and I were hanging out at the park in town. This was a rather big park with a stream running down the middle of it, and fully tucked away shaded areas that were perfect for high school kids to hide away and do what we did. We lived in a relatively small town of about 20,000 people, and there had recently been a string of kidnappings. 3 of our fellow classmates, all girls, had been kidnapped, driven up to a canyon, and then bewilderedly let go on the side of the road. Law enforcement had came to our school, and they held an assembly where they told us that the kidnapper was a Hispanic male in his 30s and drove an old white 2-door sedan. Flash forward to the park. After we were done gallivanting in the trees, we were sitting on a bench by the street just talking when a white car pulled up across from us and parked. I turned to Katie and teased, "White car over there, that is probably the kidnapper," and we both laughed. The sun was setting. We decided it was best to get home. I told Katie I just needed to go to the bathroom before we left, because I needed to poop, and I didn't want to do that at her house. I went to the park bathroom that was right by the bench where we were sitting at. It did my business. It's important to mention that this was before we had smartphones, and just had one of those sliding cell phones, so I didn't spend my whole bathroom time scrolling or looking through my phone, but rather just in my thoughts. I came out of the bathroom and noticed Katie was gone. I called her name and looked around the bathroom building. I thought maybe she too had decided to use the bathroom. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone in the trees walking up the hill from the stream. I assumed it was Katie, and I walked down towards the individual. As I got closer, I noticed it was definitely not Katie, but a man who looked fidgety. I figured he might have seen where Katie went, so I yelled, "Hey," to catch his attention and ask him. Instead of turning towards me, he bolted. For some reason, I ran towards him. I have to mention that I'm a pretty big guy. I am about 6'2", and in high school, weighed about 225. I played linebacker for the football team, so I was pretty muscly, in shape, and fast. I closed on the guy pretty fast and slowed down because I just wanted to talk to him. He slowed down as I got closer, and we were only a few feet from the white car. I asked him, "Have you seen a girl that I was sitting with a few minutes ago?" He responded in broken English, "I no see no girl, sorry." And then he got into his white car. He turned it on and peeled away quickly. It was at that point my dumb teenager brain finally decided to pull out my phone and text Katie. When I did, I noticed I had 11 missed calls from her and 5 from her aunt, who she lived with. I quickly called back. She answered and said, "Where are you?" I asked her what was going on and she told me the story. As soon as I had gone into the bathroom, the man in the car got out and walked towards her saying, "Excuse me, miss, come here." Katie's instincts kicked in and she ran. The man yelled, "You no run from me, bitch," and chased her. Katie was a regional champion track runner, and she managed to outrun him into the park and get to her house, which was only about a block and a half away. She told her aunt and uncle what happened, and they tried to call me, while her uncle called the cops. I walked to her house and she hugged me super tight. Eventually the cops came and we gave them our statements. My next door neighbor, who was a cop, told me that they eventually found out that the car was stolen, but they did not find the man. There also weren't any more kidnappings in our hometown after that. I'm grateful that the kidnapper was a smaller guy, who obviously was a bit of a wimp, and that didn't have a weapon. I'm also grateful that my girlfriend was damn fast, and her home was close by, or the story could have ended much differently. When I was around 7 years old, my mom and I lived in an apartment in a border town. My mom's a single mother. Anyway, in our apartment complex, like most, it had a playground. Luckily, our apartment was on the bottom floor and right next to the playground. Like most children, I loved playing there. I honestly can't remember, but my mom either went inside the apartment to grab something or let me play alone, but when she did, some random lady approached me. I've never seen this lady before, but she told me she had a huge Barbie doll house and a lot of toy Barbies. She told me she lived not too far away and asked if I wanted to go play. I remember saying, "I have to ask my mom first," and that's when she said that she knew my mom and it's okay. I didn't know any better and I agreed to go, She grabbed my hand and led me to her house. She did have a lot of Barbie toys, and I was playing with them, but she didn't have any children around, so I'm not sure why she had all these dolls. Apparently, I was gone for some time because it started getting dark, and that's when I heard loud bangs at the door. The lady opened the door, and it was my mom. She looked so frightened. She grabbed me, and we moved out of the apartment soon after that happened, and I honestly don't remember what happened after that. This memory came back to me not too long ago, and my mom told me that was the worst thing that ever happened, but I don't remember feeling afraid. Who knows what this lady had planned for me? Since we live 5 minutes away from the Mexican border and it's known for trafficking children, I could have easily been taken to Mexico and never seen again. My mom did tell me the reason she found me was because a bystander saw me walk off with that lady and then saw my mom frantically looking for me. I've read through some stories here. A lot of them remind me of a time when I was a kid and I had a scary interaction. So it was wintertime and it snowed recently. Everything was covered in nice pickable snow and me and my dad were making snowmen together. I was super young, in a pink snow coat and purple hat. I was obviously a kid. My dad needed something from inside, or he got tired and decided to let me play a bit longer while he warms up inside. So he left me alone. I'm from a super small town where everyone knows everyone, and it's pretty safe normally. And I was in sight from the kitchen window, so my parents felt safe to leave me outside for a bit of time. Apparently, this was more sketchy than anticipated. I remember rolling up snow for a snowman, and a van pulling up in front of me. It looked like a white minivan with a lady in the passenger seat. They asked me if I seen a puppy and said that their puppy had just ran away. I can't remember what the puppy's name was, but I'm pretty sure it was something generic like Buddy or Bandit. This is where I think back on this and my alarm bells are ringing. The woman asked me if I would like to go in her van and help them look for the lost puppy and that they really missed their dog. They asked me a few times before my dad, thankfully, saw that someone was talking to me in the yard. And he asked the lady why she would be talking to a kid alone. And the lady and whoever else was in the car just drove away. Unfortunately, it seems that small towns are more of a target than I would think. We had an ice cream man try to convince a few kids to get into his truck for free ice cream, a year or two after the lady lost her dog. Years ago, I was wandering around downtown in a city I was familiar with. I ran into another person wandering the casino outside, and we instantly started talking. He was a handsome man, around my age, that I'd never seen or met before. So we talked and he invited me to smoke at his spot. We had no car and we needed to get a ride to his spot. And now I'm in a car going to a place I've never been before with someone I just met. Okay, whatever, I'm having fun, right? Yet I recall the driver just looking at me in a way that caught my attention. He was looking at me as to see if he recognized me. We get to his house and we are excited because we're about to smoke. We walk into his house and he led me to a room. With the door slightly open, I noticed someone just laying in bed in the next door across from where I sat, and the person didn't move. He told me to get comfortable, and he left to go get some weed from the guy who was in the bedroom down the hall. I look around the room, and I noticed that there was a lot of kids' movies, a TV, and bars and blackened window. I looked at the door and there was only a lock on it, no knob, and the lock needed a key to open it and shut. I immediately stood up, grabbed what little I could of the lock to open the door, enough to quietly get out. I walked to the living room where a lady sat quietly with a child staring at a TV. I unlocked the front door and opened it, and he shouted, "Get back here!" I ran to an open gate around the yard and screamed. I ran across a busy street to an auto parts store and asked if I could use the phone. I called a friend and rambled a conversation in desperate need to calm down. I honestly believe I escaped a really bad environment that I might not have been seen from again if I didn't follow my instincts. This morning, I just got out of class and was headed home. I then saw a crippled old lady begging for help and telling me that she needed to get into her apartment. I helped her, took her to an elevator and took her to her door. To my surprise, the door was wide open. When I went inside, she told me if I could go to a nearby shop to buy her some wine and some cigarettes. She proceeded to give me her credit card and keys and insisted on the fact that I should leave my bag in her house. I said no thank you. Even though the situation was weird, it wasn't that scared me the most. It was inside of the apartment. There were no decorations, pictures, or anything. It was disgusting. There was some kind of chair with excrements on it, and the walls were filled with cracks. I got scared, took the card and keys, tried to act normal, and then wanted to test if it was a real card. I went to the store and the cashier said the card wasn't a real one. It was at that moment I decided not to go to her house and gave the keys and card to the police. A friend of mine told me that she saw the same exact lady saying the same exact thing, and the scariest thing is that she saw a man bring her outside, then immediately go inside the apartment. The area she was in is known for being dangerous. There was recently a shooting between drug dealers in daylight, for example. A bit of a backstory. I'm 18 and a leader in the Boy Scouts of America troop. The troop I'm affiliated with is about 50 minutes from where I live, and to get there, I'd have to go through a larger town, 50k plus people. This town is split in half by a river, and the part of the city north of the river is considered to be a rougher part of town and higher homeless population. After the scout meeting, I drove around town to see the Christmas lights, and eventually made my way into the rougher area. I drove past some nice decorations and then turned down a side street. There were street lights at every intersection, but it was nearly pitch black in between the street right where the alley is. As I turned, I see someone in a black coat just standing in the middle of the road where the alley is, with their arms at their side. They started walking towards me really slowly and raised one of their arms up in the air like they were signaling me. I had recently watched a video where a young woman waved a car down on a dark road and had people with her that had what I could only guess were some evil intentions. As soon as I saw this person in the darkest part of the street, my blood ran cold and I backed up and drove away as fast as I could, while paralyzed in fear. In hindsight, I probably could have called the police dispatch to see if this person actually needed help, but who knows. Context. I was 9 years old and it was mid-July summer in its prime, and I remember it being the best time of my life. It was very popular for all the kids to meet up at the neighborhood park. We would always be playing basketball, and on this particular day the sun was as hot as ever. Everyone started going home when the sun was starting to set, and soon I was the last one at the park. I usually waited for everyone to leave because I like playing by myself. After 10 minutes of me playing, there was a man that came to the park. He was wearing a red shirt, hat, Skechers, and a backpack with a teddy bear. I was shooting the ball, but I completely airballed. The man comes down from the park, sprinting, and hands me the ball saying, "Really nice ball you got there. I have some more in my house if you want to come." I remember the one rule my parents always taught me to follow. It was to never trust someone you didn't know, so I just asked for my ball back. He got really mad, then said no, and ended up walking away. I ended up going home, not telling anyone, eventually forgetting about the whole situation, until about 3 years later at one of my baseball games at the park, I saw the man at the end of the fence staring at me. I was up to bat and just lost focus because it all hit me. All those years ago, that man was trying to get me into his house, and now he shows up to my game. This is where it gets really weird, and I wasn't paying attention at all when the pitcher threw the ball and I got clocked right in the face and got knocked out. I wake up 15 seconds later to see if the man is gone, and he was. I haven't seen that man ever since. This is something I'll never forget, and it haunts me to this day. About 12 years ago when I was a child, my parents and I lived in an apartment that was built in 1905. These apartments used to be a brothel. It is basically a mansion with 8 units. We lived in Unit 2. I am a night owl and I stay up as late as possible, so I'd hear a lot of bumps in the night, if you'd say. One night I heard knocking and screaming in the hallway. It sounded like wrestling, and then after 10 minutes or so, the noises stopped and an ambulance came. The next day, my parents told me that our neighbor choked out his roommate and that he had died last night. The craziest part about it was the fact that he didn't even go to jail. He literally murdered someone in the hallway and didn't go to jail. As time went on, this neighbor started going senile. He was a drug user as well. He started jacking off with the door open. Disturbing as that is, he asked my older siblings a spine-chilling question. "Want to see something?" Then proceeded to pull out his dick. Disgusting, I know, but that is just a quarter of the things that went on at this apartment of horror. I was about 13 or 14 at the time this occurred. My dreams are very vivid and often wake me up with loud noises. Yes, loud noises inside my dreams. It doesn't make sense, but it was a frequent occurrence around that time. One day, I woke up to the sound of glass shattering and thought it was just a dream and decided I would go back to sleep. After a couple of minutes of me dozing off, I heard a blood-curdling scream from outside my window. Apparently, my neighbor accidentally fell out of a window from our 5-floor apartment building and crashed into a glass awning. He died, leaving a couple children behind. The woman screaming was his widow, I assume. This is more of a sad encounter, but the fact that I had fallen back to sleep while someone was dying outside haunts me. I can still hear the glass shattering to this day. I have these weird neighbors that have been harassing me ever since I moved in here, from the time I was 13. It's been over a decade of constant surveillance, creepy behavior, stalking, etc. I've called the police on them several times, however, this has done nothing to dissuade them. Less than an hour ago, I went out for a walk and noticed this creepy red van following me. When I got back, they slowly crept alongside the street and pulled in front of their house at the same exact time as I arrived. They do this pretty often. It's like they time their arrivals and departures at the same exact time as me. Not sure what's wrong with these creeps that prey on 13-year-old kids and still won't leave me alone a decade later. I have so many stories about these people. Not sure if this story fits here, but for some reason I just thought about it. Roughly 2 years ago, I look out my window to see a black car with tinted windows pull off the side of the road across the street. 3 people get out, a man, woman, and a small child, about 8 to 10 years old. They go onto the neighbor's lawn and take pictures of themselves in the yard and in front of the house. They get back in the car and leave. I know this was weird because I know it wasn't the neighbors and I had never seen those people before. The whole ordeal of them getting out and then getting back into the car very fast looked rushed, less than 2 minutes long. I was really confused and never seen anything like it. I had just got home and I saw a dog outside my yard. Wasn't one I had seen before, but heard some people down the street yelling for a dog, so I walked up and kind of grabbed its collar after he was comfortable. The people who were yelling down the street were a good bit away, so I had to stand there with the dog for about 3 minutes, which normally wouldn't be a big deal, but there was this random dude who was on a walk at night, and instead of going around me, or at least stopping and saying something, he just stands there. I said hi, and he just kept standing there and didn't say anything back. I couldn't see his face because he was standing in front of a streetlight and it was dark outside, but I got a really bad vibe from him, almost like he was staring right at me, but I couldn't actually tell. When my neighbors got to me, he finally walked off to the other side of the street and just kept walking. I was kind of shaken for a while. Shortly after moving into my apartment, I started having strange encounters with one of my neighbors on laundry night. I'd pass through my neighbor's carport when it rained to get to the laundromat. He stood in the shadows a bit and startled me several times, possibly avoiding the rain. I tried to be friendly, but he would just stare at me, smoking his cigarettes, and not say a word. Soon it became a regular routine for him, and then the apartment across the way opened up, and he moved into that one. I changed laundry to a daytime-only event. One night, I sat on my stoop on my phone and noticed a red light in the distance. I saw him sitting in the dark with a video camera pointing straight at me. I went inside to tell my friend, who had been crashing at my place for a few weeks, and was freaked out, but relieved about the timing. That night, my friend staying with me went out, and when he was gone, I heard loud bangs that sounded far away. But I used a sound machine to help me sleep, so I couldn't be sure what it was. The next day, we noticed the door wood around the deadbolt was all mashed up. I asked him if he noticed it when he came home, but it was late and he was a little drunk, so he wasn't sure. The maintenance people were very concerned because it looked like someone tried to break in while I was home alone. Shortly after that, I left and got a new apartment. Luckily, my new roommate had an amazing big dog, and when she was out of town one night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to him growling at the window. I went over to ensure it was locked. The next day, my neighbor asked me if I locked myself out, and I asked why. Sure enough, the screen on the outside was all twisted, as if someone was trying to break in, but got interrupted by a very big dog. The worst part was I had out-of-state plates, and all my friends kept on telling me to switch it because I was sticking out to the police. I often thought that he tracked me down by my plates and tried again, or maybe I'm just paranoid and these were a series of break-ins looking for money, jewelry, etc. I'm a male. In my early 20s, I lived in a 2-story house. The master bedroom's bathroom window faced the residential street in front. I got out of the shower one day and was brushing my teeth, looking into the large mirror opposite of the window. In the reflection, I happened to catch the sight of my neighbor, late 50s male, across the street sitting in his garage at his workbench, looking at me with binoculars. I did not make any reaction or look his way, just walked into the bedroom, got my scope Marlin 336, eased back into the bathroom and put the scope to the window. He kept looking for a few more seconds, did the classic double take. Upon realizing that we were both looking at each other through high-power optics, he placed the binoculars on his workbench and walked away. Never caught him doing it again. I assume he had been peeping on my girlfriend as she often took showers at my house. The rifle wasn't loaded. Edit. I do remember one detail. The event happened in probably 92 or 93. When I returned to the bathroom with a rifle, I didn't immediately point at the guy. I gave him the benefit of the doubt by getting back in front of the mirror. Sure enough, the binoculars came right back up. I moved out of view again, then eased back into the picture with the raised rifle. He lowered his binoculars, but brought them right back up again to view a scope 30-30 pointed his way. I lived in Japan for about 10 months a couple years back as part of a study abroad program as my placement year for university. I lived in Hiroshima, and pretty much every Japanese person I met was exactly how you would expect them, generous and respectful, all except for one old lady who just happened to live in the apartment right next to me. It was about a month after I had been in Japan. I'm originally from Northern Ireland, so it was quite an adjustment to make. Our group of gaijins decided we were going to the Saijo Sake Festival. This is a huge sake, rice wine drinking festival that, from what I understood, everyone gets extremely drunk at. As men of fine taste and culture, we sampled many different kinds of sake from all over Japan and got rode off beyond belief. We all got on the train home back to our apartments. I can't remember shit apart from calling my girlfriend at the time and passing out on my futon. Normal stuff. Skip to 6 a.m. the next morning when my loud fucking doorbell wakes me up. Keep in mind this apartment is extremely small, so the noise is extremely loud. I check the time and am confused as anything, but assume it's just my friend from downstairs who wants to talk about last night. I look through the peephole in my door and see a police officer standing there. First thought that goes through my mind is, Taylor, what the fuck have you done when you were drunk last night? But at the same time, I was sure I had just fallen asleep right away. I talked to the dude using the translation app and he basically tells me that there has been a noise complaint. Strange, considering the fact that all I did was make a phone call and fall asleep. Anyway, the guy sees how confused I am and kinda realizes there must have been a mistake and leaves. I'm honestly still drunk and just super confused, and the day carries on as normal. Next morning, 6 a.m., doorbell rings. I already kind of assume what it's gonna be this time, and what do I see through the peephole this time? 2 police officers. Same convo goes down, and I convince them that there's been no noise. I literally walk them into my apartment and show them how I fell asleep watching Netflix. They tell me at this point that it's my neighbor, who I never met, is making the complaints. At this point, I think she's just a bitch, or maybe racist. I asked the guy at my uni who takes care of all the foreign students about this, and he tells me that I'm getting moved apartments to a room on the floor below. I'm pretty pissed because I've settled into my new space, but whatever. He plans on coming tomorrow morning with the landlord to move my shit out and check that my new room is okay. Ever get it when you're woken up by something in the middle of the night and it really fucks you up? I went to sleep on a good time that night and prepped for people helping me move my stuff out. So naturally, at 3 a.m., I was fast asleep. Then suddenly, ding ding ding, about 20 times. My doorbell is just constantly ringing. It's fucking deafening, and of course has woken me up straight away. I can't even begin to tell you how scared I was. Couldn't even move. Didn't want to. After about a minute of what felt like incessant noise, complete silence, I make my way to the front door to look through the peephole, and I see nothing, but I just know that it's my psycho bitch neighbor. Nothing else happens, and I eventually go back to sleep. I wake up the next morning still kinda shaken, but it's cool. My boys are coming around soon. I kept walking out the front to check if they are downstairs, and quickly closing my door behind me, because I don't know what this woman will try if she sees me. I walk into my room and slide the door to my balcony open, and there I see her for the first time. She literally wrapped her fucking body around the fence that separates our balconies whilst keeping her footing along the side and just staring right at me. We stare at each other for a second, and then she quickly whips back around to her side. Literally 2 seconds later, my doorbell rings and I'm just like, nah, that's impossible. That's some demon shit. I'm so fucked. Thank God, it turns out to be the people to help me move my stuff, and I tell them what's up and hastily move downstairs to my new room. I was able to avoid her from then on, outside of her turning up to my new room once and asking if the police had came there. I guess the police had decided to start ignoring her calls, so crazy ass old lady, let's not meet. I'm a female and 22. I moved into my own place in the city about 3 months ago. First time living on my own, and I'm in the heart of downtown trying to pursue acting. I have 2 neighbors down the hall, both male. One is around 40 and the other one is somewhere around 70 or 80. We call the 40-year-old 40 and the 70-year-old 70. Okay, these 2 have been fighting nonstop for the past 2 weeks. Like 40 is banging on 70's door, yelling his name and saying things like, "You a bitch. You stop yelling or open this door and stop being a bitch." And 70 will literally make threats like, "Stop banging on my door or I'm gonna kill your family," and starts loudly mocking the noises of the knocking. Anyhow, when I first moved here, 40 kept asking if I was single or married. I do have a boyfriend, so obviously I told him that, and he within seconds went from trying to flirt with me and being kind to pissed and telling me to get my dog to stop licking his shoes or whatever, and storms off. Fast forward a week, he sees me and asks me again. Again, I tell him that I have a boyfriend, and he calmly says, "Nah, that's okay, I feel you, girl." So I walk off. And again, a couple days ago, this time a lot weirder, he says, "Hey, you know I was in love with you, right?" And I responded saying something like, "No, I didn't. We barely even speak." And he asked me if I lost my man yet. I told him no, and he asked if I was sleeping around. I said no, and he asked me how much people I had slept with. I asked why was he asking personal questions to a stranger, and he insisted that that meant that I had slept with a lot of people. I didn't want him to think I was easy to get at, so I simply told him I've had 2 boyfriends and only sleep with people I'm dating. He stormed off and said, "That's a lie. You're lying now, bitch." And I asked him what led him to believe that I was lying. He turned around and told me that 70 told him I had been sleeping with him. Obviously not true. And he said I just didn't want to share the love because he was black. I told him I didn't want to share the love with anyone, that I wasn't dating in general, and he got mad and stormed off yelling, "I'll show you how to share the love someday, girl." And later that night he came past my apartment after yelling at 70 and just said my name by the door. I do not know how to interpret it. My mom wants me to request out of my lease and move into a house down the road. My boyfriend wants me to move in with him. Everyone thinks I should leave. I don't know if it's creepy or what he meant by it, but one of my sisters said it might be good to post it here and get some other views, so here goes. I'd like to add, I don't just go around giving away my name. Everyone in my unit knows me because I work at a grocery store literally down the street. I didn't think the people in the new building would be so different from the people in the last. I'm female and was 16 or 17 at the time. I used to have terrible insomnia, so to pass time, I would go for walks around my neighborhood really early in the morning. It was one of those mornings, and I was just out for a walk when I heard a car approaching me. Mind you, I live in a nicer middle-class neighborhood that's a bit more secluded, so people don't usually drive through there at night, so it was a little concerning. I turn around and there's a big white van driving hella slow, about 20 feet behind me. Instead of continuing my walk, I stopped and waited to see what they were up to. It seems kinda stupid, but there's no way I'm turning my back to a vehicle at 2 a.m. just to be snatched and killed. The van then stops. 2 dark figures get out and start walking towards me. I'm like, oh shit, and start to run. It might have been an overreaction, but I had this terrible feeling in my gut. I ran towards my house, hiding behind bushes. I didn't see the van until I turned the corner. They parked near a patch of houses, and about 5 of them get out of the van with flashlights, looking around for something. They all had dark clothing on and weren't saying a word. One of the house's porch light turns on, and they run back to their van and hightail it out of there. It was pretty wild, and maybe I overreacted. I don't know, you tell me. I'm female. This story takes place when I was 14. I'm 23 now. It was late summer and I was coming home after hanging out at the beach for my best friend Maya's 17th birthday party. When I got off the subway at my stop, I looked at the bus arrival screen. The bus I would normally take home was arriving in an hour. Being a tired 14-year-old girl, I decided to take an alternate bus route home. This decision I would later regret. When I get off the bus at the stop, I have about a 10-minute walk to my building. My area at night is pretty quiet, not many cars on the streets. As I'm walking up the street, I hear the sound of an engine nearby. I look over my left shoulder and see a white panel van. I know, how typical. And it's rolling up the street. I try to think nothing of it, but when I turned onto my street, the van does too. Now I'm unsettled and start walking faster. This van is driving slowly and it never passes me. When I turned up the driveway to my building, the van once again turns. Now I'm scared. The driveway to my building has an ice rink on one side of it with bright lights, so I walk beside the rink under the bright lights. There are small townhouses on the other side of the driveway. The van catches up to me and stops. I think maybe this person is lost and trying to ask for directions, trying to find any way to rationalize this. I stop. I stay about 4 feet away from the van just in case. I look in the van window to see an older man starting to bald with black hair and a white t-shirt. I asked if he's lost and he doesn't respond. Instead, he tries to get me into the van. I say no and start walking, but the van continues to drive slowly, following me. A red car begins to drive down the driveway, and the van drives all the way to the end of the driveway and waits for the red car to turn out before reversing to be beside me again. The man is still trying to get me into the van. I want to make a mad dash to my building, but I'm worried that he would see where I live, so I keep walking. Another car comes down the driveway and the van does the same thing it did before, drives to the end and waits for the car to leave. But this time there's a cab dropping off someone at the townhouses. The cabbie is closing his trunk when he sees me. "Are you okay?" I tell him that this van has been following me, and every time a car comes, the van drives to the end and waits for it to leave before following me again. The cabbie tells me to get in his car, drives to the end of the driveway, and sits there for a bit, so I have enough time to run to my building. I tell him thank you. The van is back in line with me again, so the cabbie gets into his cab and drives up the driveway, and the van follows. I look and see the two vehicles sitting there. I run up the rest of the driveway into my building lobby, my heart racing. When I get to my apartment, I'm still freaked out. I go into my room and call the cops. While on the phone with the cops, I look out my bedroom window and see the van. It's slowly driving around my building looking for me. Now I'm fully panicking. The cops send officers to sweep the area, but they don't find him. 2 officers came to my apartment to get a statement from me. About a week after this happened, the officers came back to my apartment. They showed me a photo of the man from the van that they were able to get from the security camera on the side of my building. I told them that the man in the photo was the one that followed me. They told me they found him and that he was being put on the sex offender list. So to the man in the white panel van, let's not meet. I was walking my dog around 11:30 p.m. on a street that had no houses on it, only industrial sheds and the woods on one side, and the railroad tracks on the other side, where the train goes by every few hours. This street is only the next street over from where the residential neighborhood block where I live, and I walk my dog here several times a day and usually one final walk around this time. It's a nice street to walk my dog on because the woods make it seem more like a nature walk rather than walking down the street full of houses. I like that I could see the stars better on this road because there are no street lights. I like seeing wildlife occasionally. Several young raccoons run up the trees when me and my dog go by. A feral cat, eyes shine in the dark as it hunches in the distance. An owl hoots. As I am walking my dog on this night, I see headlights of an approaching vehicle. It's not unusual as vehicles use this street as a throughway throughout the day, especially after the city made a park at the end of the street where the road goes around a bend. There's hardly any traffic at this hour though. Sometimes the local police patrol through, other times it could be sketchy people. During the day, I find empty beer bottles and cans and teeny liquor bottles that were tossed out of vehicles. Periodically, I carry a small trash bag and pick up the litter to keep my nature walk pleasant. As the vehicle gets closer, I keep checking the headlights as I'm standing on the side of the road, letting my dog sniff around. I check every now and then to make sure the driver is staying on their side of the road and not driving erratically, under the influence or driving while texting, because I don't want to be hit. I keep my cell phone flashlight shined on my dog, who is off the road, on the grass, sniffing on the ground, so the driver knows that I'm there and keeps on their side of the road. I'm standing on my side of the road, facing my dog, and I take one last look over my shoulder at the vehicle as it approaches closer to where I am. Then I look back at my dog, so I'm not rudely staring at them. As the vehicle passes behind me, I hear it slowing down, so I turn to face it, and it stops a little past where I'm standing. I hold my phone's flashlight so it shines on the car and the driver. It's a man, young looking, maybe still in high school, but probably in his early 20s. He has a round face with what looks like short whiskers all around the bottom half of his face. It's more than just stubble, I think. I wait to see what he's up to. I say nothing, just shine the light on him. I like your dog. Thank you, I say politely, with emphasis on the first word. It's my standard response for when people say, I like your dog. It's usually kids that ride their bicycles or skateboards during the day on the way to the skate park at the end of the road, now closed, and a few other women who have stopped in their cars, their husbands driving them, also during the day. My dog is a Great Pyrenees, a large breed dog that is big and fluffy looking, and people often comment that she looks like a polar bear. She doesn't, but that's what they say. So it's not super unusual for someone to stop their car and ask me what kind of breed my dog is, or say that they like it. But it feels very weird at 11:30 p.m. on a dark, desolate road with no houses, no people around, except for a guy that thinks it's okay to stop, and after a pause he says, "You're welcome," politely, with an emphasis on the second word, in a tone that I thought almost seemed surprised that I said thank you, or perhaps he was simply mirroring my response. I say nothing else, just wait, still shining the flashlight on my phone in his direction, waiting for him to leave. It feels very inappropriate for someone to stop their car late at night on a desolate street to talk to a person who is walking their dog, especially a woman who is alone. Maybe he just doesn't realize this. He might not have a lot of social skills or social intelligence. He looked like he might be a little awkward. After a few seconds that seem long, he drives away, slowly at first, then picks up speed. When the car is a little distance away, I hear someone scream out of the vehicle, "You're a fucking bitch!" Then further away, as the car rounds the turn at the end of the street, I hear another scream from the vehicle, "You're a fucking... see you next Tuesday," just to clean it up a bit. I was standing there thinking, what the fuck? At first, I think there might have been someone else, another guy, in the car that was the screamer, but then, I think it could have been him. This gives me pause, and I'm making sure to carry pepper spray, and might just hide in the woods until cars pass by in the dark after this. There are too many weirdos in this world, and psychopaths. I just got home and I'm shaking. I had a friend over for a few glasses of wine. I had just drank one, but she had drank more, so I decided to walk her home to make sure she got there safe. She lives about 10 minutes away from me, so I thought it wasn't a big deal. But when I was walking back, a car literally stopped in the street next to me. It was full of boys, and they were asking me where I was going and what I'm doing. I didn't respond and kept walking, and they eventually drove off, so I thought I was safe. Then I saw the car stop near my block, and they saw me coming and were waiting for me to pass by them again. One of them kept asking me why I wouldn't talk to them, and that I should go with them, all while driving slow next to me. I was on my phone with my boyfriend. They again left, and I went inside. It was frightening. I have been reflecting today on several unsettling encounters I've had while walking around my neighborhood in the past year. I realized none of them are quite as creepy as most other stories on here, but I figured I'd share it anyway. The first was a very, very large man whose face I could not make out, but I definitely didn't know, who growled, "Fuck you," at me across the street late at night. Then there was a guy around my own age, 25, who followed me down the street in his car because he wouldn't believe that I wasn't Dan, a kid who apparently snuck out of his house a few blocks away. Granted, I look kinda young, but I'm still an adult male and clearly not a kid. And the creepiest to me was the time that a wall of bushes I was walking past started rustling. A guy popped out, stared at me, said sorry, then slowly sauntered away down the middle of the street. Good times. Let me start by saying that I'm a college student, 21, male, and I live with my girlfriend of 2 years, 21 female. We recently got a 6-month-old golden retriever about 3 weeks ago. I typically take him out for his last walk at midnight. Most nights, my girlfriend would come with me because I live in the city and there's quite a bit of crime around our area. This encounter happened maybe an hour ago. Tonight, my girlfriend was busy with homework, so she didn't come with me on my last walk. Everything was normal for the majority of the walk, up until I was about to enter my apartments. I live in an apartment complex with pretty poor security, so I see random people in our building quite a bit. I live on the back corner on my floor, so there's a hallway intersection right before my door. It's a giant square. As I'm walking up to my door, my dog started to fight with me as he does quite a bit. I put my hand up to indicate my dog to drop the leash, and he slowly does. I start heading for my door again when I realize there's a man standing right behind me, watching the entirety of this 30 to 45 second long situation. Now keep in mind, it isn't weird for people to be wandering the halls around 12:30 a.m., but most people are on their phones, or taking out the trash, or playing pool in the lobby. This man was carrying nothing and had his arms crossed behind his back. He kept his arms like this the entire time I saw him. After noticing this man who was literally 9 or 10 inches away from me, my body froze. I looked up at him as he was a little taller than me. His face had an expression of judgment, almost like he was waiting to see if I was going to hit my dog. My body had chills from head to toe when I met this man's face. He just looked off. The way he moved reminded me of an old man, arms crossed behind his back, and he walked extremely slow down the hall after I had went for my door again. I honestly panicked and just went for my door, stumbling for my key. I didn't say anything because I was in shock that someone could have snuck up on me and my dog without making any sort of noise. My dog loves strangers and tries to jump on everyone, but my dog didn't do anything but stare this man down. I would also like to note that it was strange that my dog hadn't noticed the man until I had fully realized myself. There's a lot of logical reasons as to how or why this encounter happened. Maybe he was just awkward, very introverted. I am a frequent reader of this subreddit and have posted my creepy encounters as well. But there was one story I was reading on here that definitely made me want to share. This story happened when I was 18 or 19. I am female and I looked very young and was only like 100 pounds. I was living on a military base. I walked my dog a lot on base. For a little background, my dog is a chocolate lab mixed dog. He is very well behaved and is very attached to me. He loves meeting people, especially children. He loves their attention and giving them kisses. One day we were walking, enjoying the nice breeze, and this man came up to me. I still have no idea where he came from. That's how bad I was shocked. He asked me, "What kind of dog is that?" He is also smiling real big. At first, I wasn't taken aback because a lot of people asked me what kind of breed he is, as he had a unique look. I answered him saying he's a Labrador mix. and my family adopted him. While I was telling him this, his eyes locked on me, still smiling. He suddenly got way too close to me, and I backed up. My dog must have felt my uneasiness, and he growled so loud and bit the guy's hand. The guy ran away from us, and I never saw him again. I literally ran home with my dog after that. If you guys are wondering if I told my parents about this incident, no, I didn't. I was honestly afraid that I would get in trouble for not controlling my dog. If you know how military bases are, they are super strict when it comes to dogs. Certain breeds are banned from the bases. I thought that my dog would have to be put down. I eventually told my parents years later about the incident, and they were very concerned. Now I'm 24 years old, and looking back, I definitely should have told my parents when I got home. I'm so thankful that my dog saved me from someone that was possibly super dangerous. And yes, my dog is still alive to this day and never leaves my side. He truly saved me, and I'm super thankful. This happened back in early 2015. I was then a 19-year-old guy living in a rather bad area of Portland, Oregon. Even though there were occasionally some belligerent homeless people and drug addicts, violent muggers were very rare, and most of the city felt very safe, even at night. One of my best friends turned 21, and we decided to go bar hopping and then go clubbing. I was in a group of about a dozen people, and 3 of which were my roommates. Unfortunately for me, I was the only one in the group who was either under the legal drinking age or didn't have a fake ID. This meant I was unable to enter the bar. However, to my luck, there's a very nice Mediterranean restaurant right across the street from the bar, which I ended up going to. I stayed there for more than an hour, and then I was ready to leave. I've done that walk many times, even at night, so I was never scared. Until this night, of course. From my apartments, my roommates and I took an Uber to the bar. This meant I would have to walk back since I didn't have Uber on my phone, and my battery was running low. The distance back to my apartment was about 3 miles. The time was already close to midnight, and I would be reaching my apartment around 1 a.m. I decided to walk the distance anyway, since I haven't been to the gym and thought it would be good exercise. I began my walk and passed by a lot of drunks. Even though some of the drunks would shout things at me, I never felt threatened by any of them, so I was okay. However, the last mile to my apartment was through a darkly lit park that can be scary at night. Not because of crime, but because there was only one street light in that stretch of road. I reached a somewhat creepy area around 12:30. As I descended down the dark, narrow street, I noticed a black Chevy Silverado speed past me and slow down once he passes me. The truck almost comes to a stop, but then decides to drive ahead. I began to shrug it off at first. However, this is where it starts to get creepy. After I walked nearly a quarter mile forward, the Chevy Silverado comes down the opposite direction and does the same thing. When the truck slows down, it almost comes to a halt. I begin to panic, but am not openly showing it. I pretend to ignore the vehicle, but my instincts tell me that something is not right. The truck then starts to proceed, but this time, I cannot keep calm. I was in the middle of the dark, isolated park with no streetlights, and there was not a single person in sight. After I walk about 500 more feet, I began to look in horror as the fucking pickup truck comes flying towards me and suddenly puts on the brake about 100 feet behind me. One man, around twice my age and bald, opens the passenger door and comes out of the truck, carrying what looked like a hockey stick. I look behind and lock eyes with him. He gives me the most haunting and sinister look I've ever seen from a real person. He begins to yell, "Get the fuck out of my sight, or I'll fuck you up, mudslime." I'm from Indian origin, and I have brown skin, and mudslime was a racial slur directed towards Muslims. As I was planning my escape, I remembered how there was a wooded area between the park and my apartment. Where I was, I could cut through the park and go through some woods, then right across the woods was my apartment. This was smart because I have taken that shortcut during the day and the truck would not be able to cut through the woods. I just ran towards those woods and heard another yelling in the distance. "Fuck off, asshole!" yelled another large man walking in the opposite direction of the sidewalk I was. I see another large man walking a German Shepherd towards me. After that, the truck driver started running at us with a hockey stick and I made a run for it. I darted towards the woods. Fortunately, the truck driver decides not to chase me and gets back in his truck. I reached my apartment 5 minutes later. In the parking lot of my apartment, I see the guy that was walking his dog. He looked like a roughed up bodybuilder, so I was a little afraid of him too. However, we had a pleasant conversation. I began to head up to my apartments and look out my apartment window. To my disgust and horror, I see the black Chevy Silverado drive by my apartment and then leave. My friends came back home close to 3 in the morning, just after I went to bed for the night. Thankfully, I never saw that creep again and moved out of those apartments a few months later. After this incident, I avoided walking alone in dark spots and isolated areas at night. To the stalker driver in the black pickup truck, let's not meet. I live in a big city, and after being here for 5 years and taking plenty of walks around my neighborhood, I never had any issues with crime or foul play. It helps that I'm a guy in his 30s standing 6 feet tall. My favorite time to go for walks was late at night when everything is quiet and still. As a horror and true crime fan, the slightly creepy atmosphere adds to the element of excitement, and I just find walking alone at night a way to clear my head and get some exercise. The surrounding neighborhoods have old brick roads and the main streets are well lit. It's easy to find very dark, shadowy streets to wander down. A couple nights ago, I found myself on such road while heading back home after a long late night walk. I was walking along when I heard a car approaching me from behind. In many cases, the car would just go by and I would think nothing of it. But this car, with darkly tinted windows, didn't go by. It pulled over onto the curb and completely stopped about 15 yards ahead of me. I looked around and realized that there was no logical reason for the car to pull over in that manner. The only house in sight was across the street. Literally no one else was around. No more cars, nothing. My intuition was screaming at me that this car was a danger to me. I slowed down my approach, but nothing happened. No one got out of the car or rolled down the window. It was like they were waiting for me to get closer. Not wanting to take any chances, I decided to do a 180 and walk back in the direction I came from. It was only a short distance to the main, well-lit road, so I walked quickly towards it, never looking back at the car. I went down the block and turned off onto another dark road in hopes of evading the car in case they turned around to follow me. I was in unfamiliar territory now, but began to walk in the direction of my house, which was a half-mile away. I made a few more turns just in case, and kept my eyes out for that white car with tinted windows, but luckily didn't have another encounter. I made it home safely, mind racing, as I considered the worst case scenarios of what the unknown person or group's intentions were. Would they have mugged me and robbed me for my house key and pocket knife? What if someone had stepped out with a gun and forced me into the car? I had trouble sleeping that night, and waking up the next morning with my life safely intact was truly a beautiful feeling. This is my second post on this forum, and hopefully it's my last. I work at GameStop. It's a great job, and I'm surrounded by everything I enjoy: games, anime, etc. I am attractive, or so I've been told. I'm not saying this to be conceited, it just makes the story make more sense. And I've even been told from my manager that that's why he hired me, because a large percentage of our customers are male. This is one particular customer that I encountered. I mainly work on the registers. This job consists of greeting people when they walk in, and of course working the register. It was getting close to closing time, and I was the only one up front at the time. I was getting started with my closing duties when I heard the buzzer go off when the front door opens. Without looking, I welcomed the customer. "Hi, welcome to GameStop. Let me know if you need anything I can help you find." Normally I get a hello or a response with a question, but it was silent. I looked up from behind the counter and saw a man who just entered the door looking at me, but once my eyes met him, he looked away and started looking at the games on the shelves. I shrugged it off. It's normal for male customers not to greet me, because they think because I'm a female, I don't have valid knowledge about games. I just continued my closing duties. I bent behind the counter when I felt someone standing on the other side. It was the man. He put his games on the counter and says nothing. I grab his games from the drawer, then proceed with the normal questions we ask. "Did you find everything alright? Do you have a phone number with us? Do you want us to protect this game for you?" My questions get met with silence, and all he does is stare. I turn my attention back to the register, and while finishing up the transaction, I could feel his eyes digging into the side of my head. I print out the receipt, put his games in a bag, and he takes it and turns to leave. I again shrug off the interaction, because again, it's not out of the ordinary for me. It's almost time for me to pull down the gates and lock up when I get a call. I groan because I think it's a customer trying to wiggle their way in before we close, and I pick up the phone. Hi, thank you for calling GameStop. This is Mary. How can I help you?" "I was just inside purchasing some games." "Oh, was something wrong with the purchase?" "No, I'm just calling you to let you know that I received your signals." At this point, I'm very confused because I treated him like any other customer. I'm not sure what you mean, sir." "I'm calling you to let you know that I picked up on your signals." Also, I know I should have hung up, but I was curious to what he was referring to. "You are very beautiful, and your signals were received. When do you get off? I'll be waiting." At this point in the conversation, I hung up and rushed forward to close the gates and lock up the store. I went into the back and told my manager about the phone call, and he said after I finished closing up, he would take me home because my apartment complex was very close, so I always walked. As I was quickly replacing the trash bag, I saw a car pull up right in front of the store and park. No one got out. Luckily, my manager parked out back, so we left through the back door. I never saw this guy again, but every time I walk home, I think about that one particular customer. So this happened a few months ago. I just got in Red Dead Redemption. Awesome game. And while I was playing online, I met this awesome guy named Rick. He was like in his 50s and is a retired firefighter. We played together for a while, helping me level up so that people wouldn't target a lower player who is also a girl. After a while, he introduced me to this guy named Black Wolf Angel, or something like that. Black seemed cool at first. We would hang out on RDR, shooting lots of bandits and doing gang hideouts. After a while, we became somewhat good friends. He then started lightly to flirt with me every once in a while. I let it slide, the kind of person I am. I made it a goal to not get a so-called Xbox boyfriend, so I tend to avoid flirting on there. We would normally hang out in parties with Rick, but one time he invited me to a party. Oh, okay, he and Rick want to play, but I was dead wrong. He started to flirt super heavily with me. I acted like I had to go, so I left. For weeks, he was spamming with party invites and messages saying, "Hey sexy," and stuff like, "I'm so horny." It finally got to the point where I was sick of him. So when he invited me the last time, I answered. Big mistake. He started the usual flirting, and I just said, "Look, Black, I'm not interested in any kind of relationship right now, so please lay off." He agreed to lay off for a few days, but then he broke his silence by sending me a message saying, "I'm thinking of suicide because of you." I flipped my shit and started to curse him out and telling him never to contact me again. I told Rick all about it, and he told me that he stopped talking to him a few days before for the same reason. So for a while, everything was cool, but then I started getting phone calls and text messages saying the same shit that he used to say. I answered one of the calls and told him to fuck off or I'll call the police. Thankfully, he stopped after that. So Black from Xbox Live, let's never ever meet again, you creep. Edit. I never gave him my number. Also turns out he stalked my friend and questioned her for my number. He threatened to hack her account. This happened about 5 years ago, right at the height of Pokemon Go's popularity. I played it regularly with my fiance Luke. We decided to get clever, and instead of walking to make our eggs grow or whatever, we would just drive down the residential streets slowly, about 15 miles per hour. We always drove the same path, and we did this several times. At the time, we lived in a very small, one traffic light town. The town was primarily low-income families. We usually played Pokemon at about 10 or 11 p.m., as did several other locals. Without other entertainment, it was a fairly popular game around town. This particular night, I'm driving the normal path with Luke. We are catching sick Pokemon left and right and hatching eggs like crazy. We paused in the water department's parking lot to catch our 217th Ekans. We drove for about 10 minutes and parked next to an empty lot. Across the street is a normal residential landscape with houses and whatnot. I was catching my first Pikachu, stoked as fuck, and some guy drives by in a beat up silver SUV. He slows down and asks me if I'm okay. I smile and flash my phone screen and tell him that we're playing Pokemon. He says something like, "Okay, have a good one." But he seemed weird, so we leave and make our last loop around the neighborhood, pausing as we collect various Pokemon. About 15 minutes later, we were back by the empty parking lot, and there's another Pokemon. Suddenly, the house across the street starts pouring a beam of light at me, very small and bright. It was weird, so Luke and I noped out of there. As soon as we did, the beat up silver SUV is behind me. I didn't even see where he came from. I turned onto the main road to head home. I didn't even realize anything was wrong at first. He pulls up next to me, and I can only see a male driving and a female passenger. The driver is shining the blinding light through his window at me as we drive. At this point, I'm simply pissed. I keep asking Luke what this guy's fucking problem is. I'm telling him to tell the guy to fuck off, all while I'm beginning to be petrified. I am a confident person, but I'm not a confident driver, and had no idea why these people were fucking with us. I do know that it was the same guy that asked if I was okay earlier. I don't want to drive home because I don't want to lead these people to my house, but I had no idea what to do. I decided to drive to the police station, but there was no one there, parking lot empty, lights off. We have like 2 police officers, so they both must have been out patrolling. I was shook. I was raised in a large city, so a tiny town living, and no police at the fucking police station was so foreign to me. I had no clue what to do, so I drove to the little hospital and managed to lose them. My fiance and I immediately changed seats without speaking. We sat there for about 15 seconds, then pulled out. He's behind us again, and he's aggressive. I called 911 at this point, and began crying to dispatch, telling them that this crazy guy is following us. At this point, Luke is flying through the town at random. He's running red lights, speeding 70 plus in residential areas, tearing through people's lawns. This was seriously as insane as it sounds. Everywhere we went, he went too. Every time we sped up, he did too. We had no idea what he wanted, but we knew that he wanted to hurt us. We could feel it. At one point, we were tearing through some yards in my car. No fences, and this guy manages to box us in. I'm still on the phone with 911. We were stuck between his car and a couple of trees. Immediately upon stopping, the guy jumps out, as does his female passenger, as well as two very large male passengers in the back seat. Luke immediately pulls out his gun and points it at them, screaming, "Get the fuck back! Get the fuck back!" They all bolt back to their vehicle and take off. I'm absolutely shaking and sobbing at this point, talking to 911, and the lady finally asks me where I want the cops to meet me. I tell her the local gas station. We are there within 20 seconds, as are the cops. This town is seriously so little. I don't know how the cops didn't see us or intervene while we destroyed dozens of yards at midnight and drove extremely fast and recklessly. Seconds after we pull in, so does the SUV. The guy jumps out and begins to rush my car. The cops stop him. They talk to him for a while, and we're just sitting in the car shaking. The older cop finally walks over to talk to us and says, "So, did one of you pull out a gun on him tonight?" We were shocked. This was the only thing he asked us. We told him yes and explained everything that happened. Cops went to talk to him again, came back and basically said that the guy thought we were casing his house because he kept seeing our vehicle pass it. The cop told us that we were lucky that he decided not to press charges because Luke pulled out his gun. My car had decent damage from driving through trees and bushes and shit, scratched up, pretty sure that these guys were gonna beat our asses, and the cop tells us that we are lucky? We were so scared and shaken up, so we didn't even argue anything and left when they allowed us to. But not before they ran all our information and made us feel like criminals, like we were childish and stupid for playing Pokemon Go. The cops openly laughed at us. We went home and stayed up all night long, taking turns peeking out our windows. We were convinced that they were going to drive around, find my car, and harass us. The next day, we had a high-tech security system installed. I have since seen the guy and the girl several times. I worked at the school, and they had a young child. I've never seen or interacted with them prior to this day, or after, but I know they know who I was, so I'm glad I don't live there anymore. I also never played Pokemon Go after that night. I should also mention that I understand why the guy thought what he did, but I do not think his reaction was justified. This all happened 3 or 4 years ago, but it still shakes me up when I recall the story. I went to my local GameStop a few miles away from my house. After picking up my game, I got back into the car and pulled out of the parking lot to drive home. I immediately noticed that the dirty black Jeep that pulled out of the parking lot at the same time as me is now behind me and driving like a complete asshole. This dude was riding my ass and swerving back and forth like he was trying to get my attention. Although it was very annoying, I wasn't really concerned at this point. I tried merging lanes, but he stayed right behind me and merging along with me. I decided to speed up, and he also made sure to tailgate me, close to 70 miles per hour. We were on surface streets. I began to panic and took a shortcut through some quiet residential areas. The street was empty, so I veered into a neighborhood and ran a stop sign. The black Jeep ran the stop sign as well and was still driving recklessly close behind me. It was getting dark at the time, so I wasn't able to see the driver through the rear view, but his license plate was clearly visible. I immediately called 911 and read off the plate. The officer told me to meet him at a Ralph's on the other side of the neighborhood where I was heading. It took me about 10 minutes to get there, but it felt like an hour with this creepy weird car lunging behind me. I finally entered the shopping plaza and noticed the police weren't there yet. I began circling the parking lot, and he continued behind me. I circled the plaza about 6 times before I saw 2 cops pull in. The black Jeep immediately took a turn, drove over a grass divider, and booked it out of the shopping center. One of the cops chased him out, and the other met me to fill out an incident report. I never found out what happened. I don't remember exactly how old I was. I remember definitely being in elementary school, probably about 5th grade. My mom and I love to go to Disneyland. We live about an hour's drive away and had annual passes. One of my mom's favorite rides was the Tower of Terror, which I was very much afraid of because of the drops. Right in front of the ride is this little area for fast passes. For anyone who isn't familiar, they're just small machines you can get passes for, and you can skip the line according to the time that's on your ticket. I would wait there while my mom went on the ride. There was always a worker there, plus many other in viewing distance, and I had one of those flip phones in case I got lost. As I'm sitting there, I hear a worker behind me talking to a man, asking him to move out of the fast pass area, since they were closing them off for the day. The man walked out and sat next to me. He was about 18 to 20. He asked beforehand if I would mind if he sat next to me, which I said no, since I didn't think anything of it. There is also plenty of space between us. Now, I was a very friendly kid, so naturally, I was going to start a conversation with him while I waited. When I turned, he was already looking at me. He stuck out his hand, offering to shake hands with me, and gave me his name, which he said was Light. Now that I'm older and have watched Death Note, I'm sure it was a reference to the show. I introduced myself to him, and we began to talk. As the conversation went on, he scooted closer to me. Again, I didn't think much of it, because we were pretty far apart before. I figured he just wanted to be able to hear me better. It was a relatively normal conversation, asking me where I was from, hobbies, how old I was, etc. Until he asked, "Do you have a phone? What's your phone number?" Luckily, I had my phone in my bag, so I just said I'm too young for one. He follows his question up with, "Are you ticklish?" Remember, I'm a teeny 5th grade girl, and he had just told me he was 19. I froze and felt the adrenaline rushing through my body as he proceeds to grab me and squeeze very high up on my thighs and the side of my stomach. This lasted for 5 seconds until I saw my mom, which prompted me to get up and run to her. I walk up though, and she looks really mad and annoyed. She was looking past me, and from behind me I hear, "Hi, I'm Light." He shook my mom's hand. "I was wondering if I could spend the rest of the day with you guys." My mom said no and he walked away. I began bawling my eyes out to her. She explained the reason why she looked so angry is because when I was a little kid, I used to invite people over to our house or to hang out with us, so she assumed I was doing it again. I didn't tell her about him touching me until I began high school, which I definitely should have, but for some reason I had this idea in my head that I would have been in trouble if I told her. So creepy, Disneyland man. Let's not meet again.
Hi. First of all, sorry for my English. It's not my mother tongue. Anyway, I was around 13 years old by the time my brothers were at elementary school. As my mom or dad couldn't take them, I had to. While waiting, I had nothing to help me pass the time. No phone, no nothing. So I was just sitting there waiting against the school fences. While I was waiting, there was just a few other people standing outside of the building. A man. I knew his face as it was not the first time I'd come here. He came up to me and smiled at me. I smiled back and said hi just to be polite. By this time I was really naive, and my parents never told me about pedophilia or being careful with strangers. He then began to speak to me about random things, and I assumed he was one of the other kids' fathers, as I saw him pretty often. Little by little, he started asking me where I live, what I like to do, and why I was here. He then told me that he works at Disneyland, and he could take me with him if I want. And then I could also take my little brothers if I wanted to as well. In this moment, I definitely felt something wrong. I was afraid of my father's action if I did something without telling him, so I refused and went to grab my brothers as soon as possible. After that, the man tried to speak to me again, but I avoided him as much as I possibly could. So creepy Disneyland guy, let's not meet again.
This story is so weird that I almost pushed it out of my mind, but my best friend reminded me of it last night, and I'm creeped out all over again. When I was 15 or 16, I was on vacation at Walt Disney World sometime during the summer. My family has a vacation club membership, so we would go a few times a year, and we live close by anyway. We were staying in the vacation club villas, which is a separated building from the main hotel. I brought two of my friends, Savannah and Victoria. We got bored around 2 a.m. and went down to the gym. It's open 24 hours. We weren't even going to work out, just take mirror selfies and mess around with the exercise balls. There is a desk for the spa portion of the gym, or maybe it's a sauna, I don't really remember. But since it was so late, there were no employees, so we were just messing around behind the desk and found a notebook. I'm not sure why. I was super annoying at the time, but I decided to write my Twitter and Instagram handles, so did Savannah. Looking back, I'm pretty sure we could have gotten in trouble since guests aren't supposed to be screwing around behind the desk. I didn't think much of it though, and we left the gym. The next morning we checked out of the hotel. On the drive back home, I get a Twitter notification. It's from a diaper fetish account. The creepy thing is, this account has been active for a while, and had disgusting pictures of grown men in diapers and other disturbing pictures of children. Savannah gets a notification too, and we both sit there looking at each other like, what the fuck? The account tweeted us, saying something like, I know who you are and what you've done, and your vacation will end abruptly. They tweeted some more creepy stuff, like telling us to watch our backs, but I knew it was clearly because we left our names on a notepad. I didn't reply back. Then I noticed a new follower, and it was my name, but the username was similar to the diapers account. The account started tweeting my address, phone number, and random pictures of me from deep in my social media. They did the same thing with Savannah's name, and at this point we were both shitting bricks. I get a text from a random number, assuming they were using a texting app, saying that they were watching us and they know what we've done. They started texting me about my boyfriend at the time, and asked really fucked up questions about him. I told them to fuck off and blocked it. I didn't get any more texts, but the Twitter account continued to tweet me about random details that I know they had to dig deep to find. I blocked them on that too, and put all my accounts to private. I never got any more messages, but the Twitter account is still up to this day. So, to the Twitter employee with a diaper fetish, please stay far away from me.
I'd completely forgotten about this until just now. I live in Florida, so my family takes a lot of trips to Disney World. And normally, I actually feel pretty safe there, despite there being a lot of strange people wandering around. It was 10 or 11 on this particular trip, and we were at the Animal Kingdom, specifically in the prehistoric play area for kids. My parents were tired of following us around, so they said they were going to go sit in a shady spot, and let me and my younger sister walk over to the sand pit, where you're supposed to be able to excavate dinosaur bones. Normally, they wouldn't just leave us out of their sight like that, but we had a pair of walkie-talkies and the place was only like a 30-second walk away. So anyway, once we got there, I radioed them to tell them that we were there. While we were playing in the sand for about 5 minutes when static came over the radio, and I took it out of my pocket, expecting them to tell us it was time to come back. But the voice that came over the radio waves was not my dad's, and it said, needless to say, we noped so hard out of that sand pit, and our parents met us halfway between where we were and where they were. The really creepy part, though, is when I radioed to tell them that we got into the sand pit, I never said where we actually were, just that we were here.
To preface, I was a 16-year-old female. I'm quite petite and generally not intimidating. I went to an amusement park with two of my friends, who we'll call John and Lucas. John is a 6'6" dude, and Lucas is 6'1" and built like a fucking tank. He ended up going into the Marine Corps. Needless to say, my 5'1", 110-pound ass was well protected. We had a fun day at the park. It was getting dark, and most of the kids had gone home. We were on our way out when John and Lucas needed to use the restroom. The restrooms were those shitty little shacks, and the one that the guys chose was in a desolate corner. I didn't need to go, so I waited outside. John and Lucas had been in there for maybe about 30 seconds when a stench hit me. I heard footsteps and turned to see this tall, bulky man in a tattered hoodie. The smell was like a mix of severe body odor and urine. I figured he was homeless. I have a huge passion of working with the homeless population, so I smiled at him and tried to ignore the odor. "Hey girlie." I was turned off by that, but decided not to let that deter me. I was pretty naive at this time. "Hi, do you need anything?" His eyes lit up, but not in a good way. He looked like a kid who had just gotten a mischievous idea. "My car broke down. I live out of it, and I don't have any money to pay for anything. Can you come help me?" A few red flags came up with that. 1. Why wouldn't he ask one of the many security guards or employees right by the general parking lot? 2. And most importantly, what the fuck is he doing in a parking lot that costs $20 and at an amusement park that costs $45? I thought about offering him some money, but I already was pretty short on cash as it is. "Sorry, sir, I don't know anything about cars." He stepped way too close to me so that he was looming over me. He grabbed my arm, hard. It fucking hurt. I don't know why I didn't scream, but I just froze. I was like a deer in headlights, just staring at him in fear. Before he could do anything, I heard the most relieving thing ever. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" It was John and Lucas, who had always been a bit temperamental and overprotective. They stormed towards the guy. John backed him up, raising to full height. The guy immediately let go and backed up. "Hey guys, she was just offering to help me with my car." John and Lucas just looked at me. All I could do was shake my head. Lucas grabbed the guy by the hoodie and pulled him close. "You lay a finger on her, or anyone else, I'll find you and fucking gut you." I noticed that Lucas had pulled out one of his pocket knives. This dude seemed to notice it too, so he turned and ran, metaphorical tail between his legs. Lucas and John confronted me, reported it to security, got me back to the car, and took me home. I told my mom about the situation and asked if they could stay over. She said yes. I didn't sleep much, but thanks to John and Lucas, I did sleep. I never found out if the guy showed his face again or got caught. Even so, creepy smelly perv, let's not meet.
This happened when I was around 11 or 12, during the summer holidays. About me at the time, I was a male about 5 feet tall, out of shape, and very shy. I was traveling with my parents in Europe, and we had been to Barcelona and Paris before, with our next destination being Tarragona in Spain, where an amusement park was called PortAventura was located. We had scheduled to stay there in one of the hotels for 4 days to visit the park, water park, and the beach club. Now the story I'm about to tell you happened on the 3rd day, in the main park. It was getting late, and most of the areas of the park were closed, except for the Mediterranean area, as a show with the fountains, lights, and fireworks was being held over the lake that night. As it was the week of the park's anniversary, I asked my parents if we could stay and watch the show, but they were way too tired after an entire day of running around the amusement park, and needed to go to the information desk to make sure things that we had bought were properly sent to our hotel room. I begrudgingly obliged. As we were in the information center, I felt the need to go to the bathroom. I asked my mother if I could go, and where the nearest one was. Turns out, the closest one is at the edge of the Mediterranean area. My parents were busy at the info desk, and I have no siblings, so they told me to just go alone. I wish I would have waited for them to be done, so I could have gone with my dad, because what transpired was pretty traumatizing. So I navigated back to the Mediterranean area, and to the bathrooms. The whole area was pretty busy, and lots of people were crowded by the edge of the lake to watch the show, because it was about to begin. I entered the bathroom and went on with my business at a urinal, until I noticed a man looking towards me. I normally don't like when people stare at me, as I was shy, but this time, instead of embarrassed, I felt danger. I glanced back at the man. He was about 6 feet tall and in his mid-20s, with a well-built physique, very short hair, almost shaved, Caucasian, wearing a gray hoodie, dark blue jeans, and leather black boots. It immediately struck me as the kind of person you wouldn't want to find in an amusement park. He was standing in front of the second urinal, as if using it, but I had the feeling he wasn't. I noticed him glancing over at me a few more times. I was done and eager to leave. I tried to pass behind him, and as I did, I noticed he tried to reach for me. I barely avoided his hand as he grunted, while I made a whimpering noise. The bathroom was very crowded, so no one noticed. As I neared the exit, he left his urinal, and I left the restrooms and looked over at the lake. The show had started. There were images being displayed on the water of the fountains with the projector, and a loud music was playing all over the speakers. I tried to blend into the crowd, hoping to lose him. After about a minute of making my way through the cluster of people, I looked back, and not but 10 meters behind me there he was, following behind me through the same paths between the herd that I had cut through. He now had his hood up, covering his face, but I could feel him staring me down. I also noticed he was now wearing what I think were black fingerless gloves. Alarms were going off in my head, as my previous stance on the situation went from weird and creepy to dangerous. I turned and started to desperately get to an area I could run away in. After about 15 more seconds of squeezing through people, I finally reached the final stretch of the lake. It was empty, too far away from the main show for anyone to be there, yet the speakers were still playing loudly here. Ahead was a maintenance path, with the gate slightly ajar, and to the left was a turn leading back to the plaza with the Info Central building. I ran as fast as my asthmatic out-of-shape self could run towards the turn. I could hear this man running behind me, his boots getting louder and louder behind me. He was gaining on me. I started to panic and run even faster than I thought I could, but he still was getting closer. I reached the turn, changed direction so fast I leaned towards the ground and nearly slipped. I felt motion behind me, as if someone had taken a swing at me, and I could hear the man's complain in a language I didn't recognize. My working theory is that it was Russian, but it was some Slavic dialect for sure. I kept running through the plaza directly to the information building, but I didn't hear the man running anymore. I turned around and saw him slip into the service gate at the end of the street. I ran inside the building and grabbed my mom's leg, stuttering and almost crying. But she was occupied with the lady at the counter, and though she saw me distressed, she told me to go sit and wait, and tell her when we left. I tried to protest, but she wouldn't listen. I was paying keen attention to the lady. As I walked over to sit on one of the chairs, I looked out the door and scanned the plaza with my eyes. I didn't notice anything at first, and almost looked away. I saw something behind a direction sign, posted next to a tree, in the most remote and dark corner of the plaza. It was the man. It felt like we made eye contact. I turned away and sat in the chair furthest from the entrance. When we were leaving, I looked over in the same direction again, and he was no longer there. I told my parents, but since I had a vivid imagination as a kid, they chalked it up to me being paranoid because I was alone, and that if it was even real, there were way too many witnesses for someone to try to pull something like that off. I wasn't happy to be called a liar about this, but considering how thick-skulled my parents can be, I didn't insist. I was just happy to have gone unscathed. I tried to forget this encounter and was successful. But having run into the subreddit and other similar stories of near kidnappings, this resurfaced in my mind and I decided to post it. As I was typing my story out, I realized how bad my situation was. The people around at the time were distracted by the show, so no one would have seen me get taken. And with the loud music, no one would have heard me scream or struggle. And the fact that that maintenance gate was open and I saw the man enter it means I almost ran right to where he wanted me. To think that I almost got kidnapped right next to a crowd of people boggles my mind. I've never gone anywhere alone in amusement parks since.
When I was about 11 or 12, I went to an amusement park called Kings Island with my sister, grandma, and mom. Since we knew the area very well and had our phones on us all the time, my mom and grandma would let my sister and I roam on our own to ride whatever we wanted. My sister and I had just got done at the arcade, and as we left the arcade, we made our way towards the Diamondback, which was a roller coaster. Before we got to the Diamondback, I told my sister she should try the swing-like carnival ride. I was on the left side and my sister was on the right side, just to paint a picture. As I was about to get in line, a man who looked to be about 30 or 40 walked up to me. He put his hand on my lower back, butt area, and walked alongside me. As I gave him a dirty look, he immediately apologized and claimed that he thought it was his girlfriend. Then he walked away like nothing happened. I bawled my eyes out and immediately ran back to find my mom and grandma. I explained what happened, and we decided to leave the park at that very moment. While I was young at the time, I heard enough stories about abductions to know that it could have ended worse. Considering the fact that I was 11 or 12, while my sister was 9 or 10, and he was about 30 or 40, I remember thinking there was most likely no way he thought I was his girlfriend, or that my sister was anywhere close to his age. Maybe he did think I was his girlfriend, and it was an honest mistake. Either way, it creeped me out a lot. I've been having blackouts for almost a year now, but no one seems to notice. The first time was at my 16th birthday party that my family threw for my cousin, Adam. His dad got him a DVD of a horror movie he loved, and we decided to watch it since only Adam had seen it before. I was really looking forward to watching the movie, but I fell asleep just when it was getting started. When I woke up, the end credits were rolling. Everyone was talking about their favorite parts of the movie. Dennis was more into it than any of us, Adam said about me, and at the time I assumed it was a joke. For a while, I thought I was falling asleep at strange times. Then, in geography class, I blacked out like I always did. When I woke up, however, I looked down to see a full page of notes on the lesson, all in my handwriting. It was like I wasn't actually gone, just running on autopilot. I tried to keep track of when I blacked out to see if I could figure out what was causing it. But then I'd just fall asleep and wake up to find my records missing or destroyed. I'd take notes on my arm, fall asleep, then find them scrubbed away. Something was trying to stop me from understanding it. I could feel myself losing grip on reality, and I didn't think anyone would believe me. Eventually I figured it out. The pattern was both simple and cruel. Anything that I felt refreshing was being taken away from me. Anything that relaxed and recharged me was being stolen. I would get the physical benefits of downtime, but not the experience. My stomach would be full after the blackouts, but I didn't get to enjoy the meal. It made life miserable. Yesterday, I finally broke down and told Adam everything while I was at his house. We were hanging out a while our parents were at the movies, and when he asked me if something was wrong, I just lost it. I told him that I was having a breakdown, and he offered to help. Adam called our parents, but none of them answered. We knew what theater our parents were at, so we decided to take the bus there and tell our parents what was going on. We took our seats on the bus, and Adam put his hand on my shoulder. "We'll figure this out, Dennis. Don't worry." I was so relieved I could barely hold back my tears. I finally reached out for help, and someone was there for me. I closed my eyes just for a moment, and he was gone. I was on a bus, but it wasn't the same one. I was the only passenger. I looked down on my arm and saw something written on it in my own handwriting. "They'll never find him. Don't make me do that again." Good morning, sunshine. Time to wake up. I open my eyes to see Nurse Judy, ready to give me my morning injection. I sit on the bed and roll up my pajama sleeve. I feel the needle under my skin, and the medication flowing inside my veins. The nurse gives me a wide smile. "Good girl. You can go to the canteen now and have breakfast with your friends." Friends? I don't have friends here. My friends are almost 60 miles away, enjoying life, learning new stuff, making out at parties. Certainly not spending their youth in a psychiatric ward. My parents put me there. It was after another anxiety attack at school. I lost control and tried to do something stupid. Now everything seems stupid to me. I passed by Nutsy Nora's room. Her yelling is impossible to ignore. She keeps screaming, "Callie and Jenna!" over and over again. I see two doctors rushing into her room with a set of tranquilizers. This place is full of people like her. I don't think I belong here. I enter the canteen and hear a loud, "Surprise!" I look around to see all the other patients gathered around a cake with numbered candles, 1 and 7, and an inscription, "Happy birthday, Robin." Right, It's my 17th birthday. Yay, I totally forgot. I forced myself to smile and blow out the candles. The cake tastes like soap or a cough syrup. I hide both candles in my pocket when no one's watching. I guess it's the only gift I can count on today. I stop one of the nurses on my way back to my room. I ask if my parents are gonna come see me. She shrugs and walks away without saying a word. Bitch. As I lay in bed, I stretch out my arms and look at my hands. They look so weird, so damn weird. Maybe it's a side effect of one of those medications. Nurse Judy interrupts my contemplation. She storms in with the afternoon's dosage of pills. How are you feeling, my dear? Did you like the birthday surprise? She asks with an annoying sweet smile. Yeah, I forgot today's the day. She takes my hand and says, "Oh, don't worry, darling. It happens to everybody." As she holds my hand, I ask her why my skin looks so strange. Nurse Judy gives me a sympathetic gaze. I think it's normal at your age. Don't you think so, sweetie? Is she trying to make a fool of me? But I'm only 17, I said imploringly. I don't know any other teenagers with hands like these. Just look. I take the candles out of my pocket and almost rub them in her face. You see? 1 and 7. 17. Judy gently takes the candles from my shaking hands. Robin, it's not 17. Let me show you the right order. It's 7 and 1. 71.
Our farm was small, and we had a lot of land. Most of the fences were ruined, and my dad would try to go and fix it, but it was difficult for him since he lost a leg back when I was born. I touched the scar on my shoulder that ran to my collarbone. My parents explained that wolves attacked our farm. Dad had to have his leg amputated because of an infection after being bitten. Trying to salvage the farm costed them too much, and when they tried to sell it, nobody wanted it. So, we were stuck. My parents were always paranoid that the wolves would attack again, so they never let me out past dark. I've been homeschooled my whole life. I don't have any friends. I don't have anyone except my parents. We lived miles away from other people, and we didn't even have internet or phone service out here. Sometimes when I go out with my mom to the store, I would see girls holding hands and laughing. It makes me sad. But sometimes, late at night though, I don't feel so alone. I can hear their voices. They were far away, but I could hear them calling me. Myra, come home. My parents almost never let me watch any movies, but when it's really late at night, the TV would play those old black and white movies, and I finally saw one about werewolves. So, whenever Mom would take me to the library, I secretly learned more about them. I became more certain that this was my real family. I waited until my parents went to sleep one night. Then I ran out the back door. I jumped the broken fence and ran into the forest. It was dark, and the only light was coming from the moon. I stopped when I no longer heard the howling. I panted as I could see wolves approaching me. I smiled, feeling uneasy. I'm home. I'm home, I panted happily. The growling continued, but stopped when a loud growl emerged. Behind a tree, a large wolf walked towards me. When he stood up, I felt a sudden fear seize me as all the other wolves bowed their heads to him. He walked towards me, and I kept my head down, staring at the ground. With one hand, he grabbed my neck and forced me to look at him. His face was that of a wolf's, but he looked nothing like the werewolves I saw on TV. His face was scarred up, one eye was foggy, and I assumed he was blind. He sniffed me up and down, and then stopped at my scar. Welcome home, I barely understood from the gurgling. I stared back at him, and for a moment, all the fear left me. I gently placed my hands on his and closed my eyes. It felt like I finally found my place. I then opened my eyes when his hands started to tighten around my throat, and I could see he was salivating.
It's been years, maybe decades, since the last time I've seen anyone. I looked down. My fin was beginning to decay. My time was running out. As I broke the surface, I could see a large boat in the distance. Swimming closer, I saw a family of 3 on the boat. I poked my head just above the water as a little girl, no older than 8, saw me and yelled out, "Daddy, Ariel is in the water." I quickly dipped back into the water and followed the boat at a safe distance, every so often poking my head out of the water to reveal myself to the little girl, and without fail, she kept calling her parents to come over and see. The boat finally stopped and I saw some fishing lines drop from the front of the boat. Good. I got close to the boat as I ascended. I held my index finger to my lips, hoping that the little girl would understand. When she saw me, she was about to speak, but then she covered her mouth and nodded. She had a little pink life vest on, big bright blue eyes, and soft blonde hair that bounced around her cute face. "Is your name Ariel?" She bounced up and down. I thought about the Little Mermaid, something that I haven't seen in a long time, and nodded. "But you're old." Her words stung me. I scowled, but quickly masked it with a smile. I waved to her to come into the water, patting the surface, making teeny splish-splash noises, and she stared with uncertainty until I raised my fin to entice her. My fins, though decaying, were still a vibrant purple. Her eyes lit up, and she jumped into the water. As she did, I unbuckled the vest from her and tossed it aside. I patted my back, and she climbed on, looking nervous, wrapping her little arms around my neck. I glanced over my shoulder, holding my nose, and she mimicked me by taking a deep breath as we dove under. It became darker the further we went. My heart was racing when I pulled her hands away and turned towards her. I opened my mouth and my jaw extended outward, the skin on my cheeks ripping as my jaw becomes unhinged. My teeth start to grow, long and pointed, like an angler's. My nails became jagged and sharp. I saw the horror in her face as I lunged at her, sinking my teeth into her little neck. Little air bubbles escaped her as she tried to scream, but I consumed her. When I came to, I was looking up at the sky. I could hear seagulls nearby and feel the waves crashing on my legs, but I couldn't move my body. I lay there for a while before I heard someone yell in the distance, and soon enough I heard footsteps approaching me. A man hovered over me. "Are you okay, little girl?" I always told Sarah and our children that I was only afraid of death. Nothing else frightened me, not even heights or spiders, only the inevitability of one day facing my own mortality. I don't fear anymore. No, I welcome it. I beg for it in these everlasting, unending moments. There is no rest for me, as I can't sleep. I am forced to stay awake and listen from my resting place, accompanied in this void by the constant beating of my heart. It's a curse, and I don't know what I did to deserve such a fate. My family can't hear me because they believe that I'm already dead. I hear them when they visit me though. They treat my resting place as a confessional, sharing their most intimate thoughts and beliefs, as though they are speaking to no one at all. But no, I hear them. I have no choice. It is a small gift that, over these years, these visits have become less frequent. Sarah was the first one to stop visiting. She begged for forgiveness and understanding, as she had finally relented to our children's wishes and moved on from our union. Their stepfather was kind to them, Sarah told me, and they are both on the path of truly seeing him as a father. "I'm sure you would want me to move forward," she told me, unable to hear my silent protest. "He keeps me safe. He makes me happy." Daggers to my still beating heart. I don't think I've wished for death more than I did that day. if only to end my constant suffering. Michael was the second one to stop visiting. He admitted to hating me for not being there to teach him how to be a man. He blamed me for his own immaturity. It pained my heart when Renee stopped by recently to hear from my resting place that my daughter walked down the aisle with her stepfather instead of me, that she was expecting her first child in the coming months. She had the audacity to pray that I would be there to watch over my granddaughter, guiding her as she enters the world. I am so desperate to leave, I spit on her prayers. Renee believed in her more candid moments of confession that she was the only one to care for me after all these years. She saw her more frequent visits to my resting place as a badge of honor, something to brag to her friends about, because it made her a good person. If she wished to honor her father's memory, she would have pulled the plug years ago. But of course, she insists that I wouldn't want that, which I suppose is my own fault. He was only afraid of one thing, she tells the nurses. I know he'll never wake up, but this is what my father wants.